ScreenCraft was like, okay, we're going to start sending out your material. Like, these are the places that we're thinking about, but you give me, a list of people that you want us to send it to. That's when it clicked me, because I was like, okay, the manager will like your work and has to be passionate about you, but you also have to be passionate about them. And I think we do forget that. We're like, oh, yeah, someone wants us, and we go for it.
I would love to start with how you even initially got into this craft. Was there a movie you watched that inspired you, or have you been a writer your whole life? What was it that even initially got you interested in screenwriting?
I mean, I was always writing short stories since I was like a little kid. And they were mostly horror stories.
I definitely want to talk to you about horror specifically, because it seems
yes.
like really
yeah, like I remember even my mom getting worried at some point. She's like, Lucy, you should watch other stuff. And like, why are you writing things about you being dead, or, but my mom, she's a family doctor, but for a long time she was a medical examiner. So I feel like I was very close to death and yeah, grief and that sort of part of life. So I think that's why.
I was going to ask, what is it about horror? What do you think it was? Was it just, like you said, like being attracted to death, or is there something else going on there that gets you to like really pursue it?
I think I'm fascinated by fear overall. Like, just, I mean, not just my mom's work, because I think the way my mom approaches her job was very tender. It's a weird word to use for opening up a body. But she really wanted to find answers. She's like, if I can help this family with, in the grieving process with some answers, hey, your son or your person, whoever, this is why they died. Like, of course there is like, it's horrible. Like, grief is just one of the deepest emotions that I think I've witnessed. That was another thing, right? Like, being around and listening to the families coming to identify a body and just unraveling was like, but I feel like giving that answer, at least you're not saying like, oh, but what happened? But why now? You have that answer. Now you can just grieve, now you can just say goodbye. So I don't know. That is one thing that I think I'm a little obsessed with grief, but I also with fear. When I was growing up, I'm from Mexico. So when I was growing up, the cartel was on the rise. And wow. I'm from this state called Michoacan that it's featured in Breaking Bad and in Narcos, because that's why. So I think I lived in fear without even knowing. Like all these rules to go out as a woman. Like, even now I'm 32, and when I go back home, I don't go out on my own. Like, if at 10 p.m. I'm like, oh, I feel like a chocolate from the store or something, my brother comes with me. Wow. Because it's just,
do you think, like, and even talking about your mom, like, that's so interesting. Just like you said, she approached it tenderly, because it's like you said, it's such an extreme emotion to experience, but it's almost like she approached it from an artist's perspective. Like, she was like an artist with the way that she went about communicating to the people that she was like dealing with. But also, do you think of writing as like a form of therapy for yourself? Like, it kind of helps you process emotions and process a lot of this stuff?
Not necessarily. I think for me, it's just exploration. I just love to see what fear does to people. I think that, things like love or bravery, you may not actually get to them until you actually face your fears. So I think that's what I love about horror, is like, truly, in a nutshell, it's just a person, the protagonist, confronting their fears. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And what happens after that, there's, of course, the yay, conquering the final girl. And it is because you conquer your fear. And we have this character that is more brave or whatever. But I also love to explore what happens when you don't do it, when you have tragedies like Hereditary. Yeah. Which is honestly a grief story. That's why I love that movie, because they just couldn't cope with the grief and it took the entire family down, so I think that is what I love. But I don't think, I mean, it's therapeutic sometimes. Yeah. Like, if I have something going on and I just put it out, like, it's out of my system, but it's not something that is like always a therapy. I just see it as Like I'm mostly curious to see what happens.
So you started with horror short stories and stuff. When did that start to transform more into like getting into movies? And did you watch a lot of like horror movies and stuff when you were a kid?
Honestly, it was when I watched I would rent movies once a week with my mom, and I think it was Peter Pan, that it was, or Harry Potter, I can't remember, but one of these DVDs that, they had the behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah.
So I would watch all that. Oh, I miss that stuff. Like they don't do that anymore. But
I know what is up with that? I swear I was just thinking the same thing. Like, why isn't there more behind the scenes stuff going on in cinema?
I love it. It's just like I've been watching these movies, right? So the first time that I watched it behind the scenes, I was like, it just hit me that it was like these hundreds, the hundreds of people just coming together because of something someone wrote.
Yeah,
So that's when I was like, oh my God. I mean, I've watched movies my entire life, but I didn't kind of realize that they were connected. Like initially when I was already writing, but I didn't know, like I didn't click. So I was like, I want to do movies. And the first thing that came to my head was like, maybe an actress, because that's what I saw, right? In the movies, that's the first thing that you see. So then I tried that and I'm like, no, I'm not in front of the camera. And then, yeah, when I watched the behind the scenes, I'm like, I want that power. It's like, really? Yes, the director is, kind of like guiding everyone, but it's the writer that created this world, and that's why everybody's there. So
yeah, I love you say that. We like screenwriters don't get enough credit, even still to this day, but it's true. Like the screenwriter is the person that takes nothing and turns it into something,
yeah.
I'd like to ask this question too. Do you remember like the first screenplay that you read, or the first kind of real introduction into screenwriting you got?
It's the first screenplay that I read was V for Vendetta. I
Really?
remember that. Yeah, I don't know why. I started well, I can't remember how old I was, but I was starting to Google, you just like screenplays to read. And it was one of the ones that was just more available for some reason. Another one that was also very early on was Juno.
Not horror, complete opposite.
Not horror, no. And yeah, the first horror script that I read was Scream. I do remember that.
Just probably the best introduction that you could read, honestly.
Oof. Yes, the opening is great, but when you actually read it, it did make me like shiver. I was like, whoa, this is really good. That opening is amazing. Yeah.
So when did you start to get serious about it? Like, when did you start to really think, I'm going to try to pursue this and like really turn it into something? When did that start happening?
I think so I went to college for digital art, which was very broad. Like you would learn from animation, design to programming. It was like a lot, like very, very broad. And I had a screenwriting class. So I remember that, and it was just one semester. So when that class finished, I was like, what am I doing here? So I dropped out. So I was like, yeah, I don't like the rest. I mean, I learned good things like Photoshop and a little bit of design that I kind of still like playing with, photography. But actually the class of screenwriting, I'm like, I want this. And then I started looking, and again, I'm from a very small city, and there were no schools. The first school that opened, actually, I think it opened when I left, or when I was about to leave. So I was just looking. There was nothing. So I started taking like just seminars whenever like John Truby and like, the Muggles would like go to Mexico for like a weekend. So I started doing that. Nice. And then I was like, well, there's really nothing here in Mexico. We have really good film schools, but there's just like two. It's very, very hard to get in. Everybody from Latin America is going to those schools. And at the time, they were only focusing on directing and producing. So I was like, well, I have to leave the country. So that's when I found the New York Film Academy. So I went to Burbank. And that was 2014.
Yeah, I was like, when did you make it out to LA? And what was, what was that transition like too? Like moving from Mexico to Los Angeles, like what was that whole transition like, and like the learning curve, and how is all that? We have, and I asked because there is a lot of people in the screencraft community from all over, not just in America, but from like all over the place. So what was that
Yeah.
transition?
I mean, the first year was amazing because I was just focusing on studying, but I only went to, I only did 1 year. And so it was like this conservatory that was just 1 year because I couldn't afford it. I was earning in
Yeah.
pesos and then spending in dollars. So I only had for 1 year, and that year was like wonderful. I was not worried about anything, just writing a lot. It was amazing. But then you actually realize that it's really hard to stay. So they give you if you complete a year of studies, the government gives you what it's called an OPT, which is a work permit. It's not a visa, it's just a work permit. So I used that, and then I thought, I was like, sure, I'm gonna get a job as a writer. It doesn't work. I graduated, but I still had to polish my material. It was not ready. So I spent the next couple of years doing that. I had to go back home. Then I was like, okay, I'm gonna apply for the O1 visa. And that was a journey because you have to prove that you're better than anyone else. But at the same time, how do you prove that if you're not allowed to work yet? So it's kind of like a chicken and the egg sort of situation. And to me personally, I do think that the immigration journey has been the toughest. Breaking in, I know it's hard, but after going through immigration, to me, that was a piece of cake. Or it was just like, it's not easy, but I'm like, I can do this. This stress
you
not
built. Yeah, I mean, you really built that confidence and that belief, and just the turmoil of that, like you build so much discipline with that. But that is really interesting to know for people maybe listening that are not in America and they want to get here, that you go for 1 year, and if you complete that year, then you can get another year, which is good to know. And then maybe people can kind of plan for that and kind of save money or plan for that. So what was like the first screenplay you wrote? Like, and I mean, the first kind of serious screenplay that you wrote where you're like, okay, wow, this is going to be something that can really like move me forward. How did you learn to write first off? And then what was that process like, writing that first script?
Well, the first script was actually in school, at the New York Film Academy. Yay, cheers. Yep. But I loved it because all the teachers were like, you're just here to learn. Don't expect anything good to happen with your first script. And that's a lie, because like, it's not that it's a lie, but I feel like probably the people that write something in school, they just leave it as it is. I was like, no, this is good. I'm going to continue to polish it. So my first screenplay was Sophie and Valentina. Oh,
wow. That one was your first one? Wow.
Yeah. Funny enough, was not a horror. And it was a love letter for one of my uncles. And I was just like, yeah, I had to write it. He had passed away that year. And I was just like, I'm gonna do it. I had an incredible mentor and teacher over there at New York Film Academy. His name is Matt Harry. And I just continued to polish it. And it is the one that opened all doors for me. I mean, talking about ScreenCraft, I won the fellowship.
Just let me like quickly. I love the what you sent me. I'm gonna just like kind of go through that really quickly. And that's so surprising. Like your first screenplay is the one, but so this screenplay is the one. It's the award-winning script. HBO Access Fellowship, ScreenCraft Fellowship, Young and Hungry list. And then do you mind going into a little bit of kind of your journey with submitting to these fellowships and to any other contests or anything you submitted to? Like, what was that? How did you hear about these competitions first off, like kind of your intro to these, and then what was that process like submitting it to all this stuff?
I was very lost. It was just Googling 1,000 hours a day, and I lost a lot of money because when you don't know which ones are the good ones, I mean, at least I submitted to everything, and I don't even want to look at how much I spent on it. And most of those were just, I don't want to say scam, but it's scam. They're like, just to make money, and they're not gonna
If you don't mind, I love that how you're just being so open about this, because I do, this is something that we do try to tell people in our community. We're a competition ourselves. So it's so
Yeah,
important for us to be honest and like be transparent about this stuff, which is partly why I'm doing these conversations. Like we're trying
yeah,
to be transparent about everything, but no, there are a lot of scam competitions, and just like we always say, submit to competition. There's amazing opportunities, but you got
yeah,
to do research and be careful and do your due diligence. But there's a lot of people that have gone through the same thing, where they just kind of submit to a bunch of
yeah,
stuff and lose money. So I appreciate you being open and just
yeah.
sharing that. So
No, I mean it was hard because even winning some of them was like, cool, here's like a certificate, and it's
yeah.
like, okay. But like they don't help at all, and so they just take the money and run with it pretty much. So I think the way I found which ones were the best ones was just by actually continuing to follow for years, like the first time that I found ScreenCraft, probably I was like, okay, well, that's another competition. But then after following them for so long and reading, I'm like, oh, this person got signed here. This person has a project here. So I think, yeah, taking a look at the success rate. The other thing was that I could not apply to fellowships when I didn't have a visa, because
I
you
see.
have to be allowed to work, because some of
Gotcha.
them give you a stipend, and you have to have social security. So it wasn't until I got my visa that I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna apply to the good fellowships, and it really was just HBO and ScreenCraft. I was like, I'm not gonna spend more money. I'm just gonna do these ones, and if they don't want me, then I'm gonna look at another, I don't know, another route. But
Gotcha.
it went
So,
well.
so, so I find I still like, congratulations first off, and I'm always so blown away, like when it's like the first script you read. Like I've written so many bad scripts myself. Like I'm just now starting to feel like, okay, I'm starting to get confident in my writing. It took me a while, but so what was it like when you won these fellowships? Like what was, if you don't mind, you can go into detail like however much you want, but I am curious, like what doors started opening? What were some of those connections that you started getting? Like, what was that
Yeah,
process?
everything. So I had placed in other like smaller competitions before, and I remember I signed with a manager back in the day, and I was for about a year with that manager. And I remember there's this fear, and this is actually something that I do want to be very honest, because I feel like all writers, we're waiting so long to get a yes, that when one comes our way, we just say yes to everything, right? So for example, that manager, I remember at the time there was no momentum for me. It was just like one, you know competition or something, or an introduction. I can't even remember how it happened. But I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go for it, because like nobody else wants me, like this is my only chance. But I do believe that once I actually, got into the fellowships, I just realized how little I knew about the industry. Like you can know a lot about writing, but then the industry is just a completely different beast. So my mentors started talking to me and being like, you need to switch managers, because, there were just things that were not working out, that for like I felt it, but I didn't really. I was just like, oh, Lucy, you're being a diva. Oh, Lucy, you're very, like I was putting it on me, but
Yeah, yeah.
truly it was like, no, actually, in a year, just 2 meetings is not okay. So,
I appreciate you sharing that. Like that, it is so important. Like this would be a really good clip to put on social media, because it's so true. And there are other people I've interviewed that say the same thing. Like when you meet with a manager, you're interviewing them. It's
yeah,
a two-way street, right? And I think a lot of people fall into that same position where they just kind of like say yes because they're just so happy. But I appreciate you
yeah,
sharing, because it's so true. It's
yeah,
really
and people compare it a lot to dating, and I honestly think it's true, because this manager, she was wonderful. Like as a person, I really connected with her. She was really sweet. She was really excited. But that's also hard, because it would be easier if they were difficult or mean or whatever, because then you'll be like, oh, bye, right? But it was like, oh my god, but I really like her, but like it's just not working. So I was really, really stressed, and ScreenCraft helped a lot with those conversations, and my mentors in HBO as well, and even the other fellows there, seeing what their team was doing for them. I was like, okay, yeah, I need to do something about it. And yeah, ScreenCraft was like, okay, we're gonna start sending out your material. Give me, like, these are the places that we're thinking about, but you give me, a list of people that you want us to send it to. And that's when it clicked me, because I was like, okay, the manager will like your work and has to be passionate about you, but you also have to be passionate about them. And I think we do forget that. We're like, oh yeah, someone wants us, and we go for it. And I remember being like, you know what, I really admire Kaylee Marsh. Like, I just love, how driven she is, a podcast that I've, heard, her clients, the blood list. So I remember saying that name to Tom from ScreenCraft. I was like, yeah, Kaylee, but I'll put together a list if you want me to. And it happened. I didn't even gave him a list. So it was just it was
amazing.
cool. Yeah.
So nice to hear. Can you tell me a little bit about I guess starting with ScreenCraft, I guess we can start with that. I definitely want to know about HBO too, but what was let me think about the best way to approach this. There's people that get into fellowship, win competitions, and then they're kind of like, okay, well, what next? Like, what do I do? So do you have any tips or kind of like any wisdom that you've gotten from the process of going into the fellowship, meeting with people? Like, what tips could you give to anyone that might be right there about to get that opportunity? Like, how can we prepare going into that situation?
Well, I would just say have at least 2 scripts. The way I got in was one feature, the one that won, but I also had like 1 pilot. So I think at least 2 to be ready, because they're gonna be sending your material out, and if you don't have that, then I think the momentum will probably die for you, because it's what they say, right? When like preparation meets opportunities, like you gotta have your scripts. Something that I do think is very important is pitching yourself, which is so weird, because usually it's like, okay, I don't know, I grew up here, and then you just go on a tangent on like where you went to school and everything. But I feel like that was something that I learned in the HBO program, was like, can you just actually grab those experiences that made you a writer? So now, if we go back to the beginning of this interview, I talked about my mom, and about being a medical examiner, and about my, the cartelling, living in fear, and why I like exploring fear, so it's kind of like
you did a good job in the beginning. Like, you gave us a good example, because I was about to say, like, what tips do you have for someone, or what are kind of some, I mean, you just gave some really good stuff, but with pitching yourself, but also pitching your work, like what kind of tips or advice do you have? Because I'm sure that that's something that at this point it's something that just happens all the time. Once you start getting momentum, like, pitching is a very important process. What tips do you have, or even resources or anything to get better at pitching?
Oof, I mean, pitching is it's almost a performance. So I do think that I do feel bad for us writers that we have to do it, because it is hard. Like, I can see I'm getting better at it, but there's a lot of writers that there's a reason why we're behind the computer, right? That are like, I don't want to put myself out there. So I would just say getting comfortable. Like, I practiced a lot in the mirror just to let it out there, because I was one of them that I'm like, oh, I'm a little nervous. Then you see like actors turn writers, oh my god, like they're gonna sell everything, because they're just like amazing, they're ready, they like doing that. So I'm now enjoying it. I try to be very conversational. I try not to learn or memorize what I'm gonna say. Like, I have my things that I want to hit, but I don't memorize, because then I feel like, I don't know, it's so core for me when you're like just reciting something. I think pitching is just knowing who you're pitching to, right? Like, or pitching yourself to. When I got my first job interview, that was, the 2 sentence horror stories. It's like, okay, it's a horror. So what am I going to say? Well, I grew up in a more, so it's kind of like targeting your audience and just like try to go into your life experiences and do you have something that ties with the project or the person that you're pitching yourself to?
I'm curious too. I guess this kind of connects to it, but do you have any tips, advice? Because it's the same thing. Like you said, a lot of writers are there's a reason why we like to be behind the computer and we're doing that. Do you have any tips for networking, building relationships? I mean, I always loved everyone that I talk to. I love to get this perspective because there is just in the screencraft community, even we get the question all the time, like, I don't live in LA, or I don't know how to connect with people. I don't know how to network. What does that even mean to connect? So I always love to get the perspective, like what advice or tips or what have you learned, just kind of having the momentum you have with your manager now and like connecting in these meetings, like any advice that you have with networking?
Yeah, I believe in making friends more than networking. When I was getting started, I was also going to like networking events and, screenwriting networking events. I can't remember hosted by who, but anyway, I would go to them and it was just awkward. And I was just like, I'm good at conversation and I think I'm very social, but awkward in the sense that you could tell, that there was not a genuine interest. It's just like, okay, what do you do? Okay, here's my business card. And it's just like, I actually do want to talk to you. I actually do want to know more about you. So I believe in making friends. I think I was lucky because in both fellowships, there were more fellows. So I'm in touch with them and I'm friends with them. In my first room, I'm also like, I'm friends with them, right? So that's what I believe in now. Not being in LA is hard, but I do see I used to love Twitter. I don't anymore for obvious reasons, but
crazy.
But I do think social media, can help a little bit with connecting with people. I used to really say that, but now I'm like, I don't know if I should give that advice anymore because I don't like social media anymore. Well, especially Twitter. I find it very violent. People are upset all the time. It's just a lot of, I don't know, it's an energy that I'm like, I'm going to step away.
We're 100% like ScreenCraft is even like, we're like, okay, what's going to happen with Twitter? How can we get better on other platforms, like to keep the community going? Because it's just, who knows what's going to happen with Twitter right now. But I fully agree with you. Yeah. I'm personally on Twitter. ScreenCraft has a Twitter. Me personally, I'm not, because of that reason. Like it's toxic and it's just hard. I don't know, how do you even connect with people on Twitter? It's such a weird format, even, like just these little sentences, like how do you even connect? But
yeah, no. And even that connection is kind of like, at first I'm like, yay, writers, coming together, but then you join and there's always drama in writing Twitter. I'm like, guys, I don't know if you know how you're coming across. So I think it can be a double-ended sword, because a lot of showrunners and a lot of people that are hiring, they're like, if I go and see your Twitter and you're complaining about everything, you think you look so cool, I'm not gonna want to work with you, even if you're coming from this place of things should get better. Because there's a lot of virtue signaling too that I'm like, are you really worried, and are you really trying to do this better, or do you just want me to clap at you and be like, yeah, you're a great person? There's a lot of that I'm kind of like, I don't like it. I'm like, there's a lot of people doing good things that we don't have to be screaming at it all the time from a place of, I don't know. I don't want to judge, but all this to say,
exactly
I do think, I do think it became very, very toxic. So I don't know how to help the writers that are not from LA. I guess even like tuning into this podcast, right, and just like reaching out to people. If possible.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I love that you mentioned that you are friends with people in the fellowship and you still are connected, because I think that is the beautiful thing about these competitions, just in general, the good ones, is like form the community with the people that you're participating with, make those connections. And like, It's so true. Like you say, it's so disingenuous on you don't, it's how do you know who someone is just from a
Yeah.
social media, but use social media to connect with them, but then go deeper, try to
Yeah.
connect with them in a real way. But there is that you can use social media, try to connect with someone, but like you said, it's about friendship. I mean,
Yeah.
build.
Yeah. I even remember in the screencraft dinner when we were going around the table of like, what do you want to get out of, the fellowship, and everybody, just giving these profound answers. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I just want to make friends. And everybody went like, oh, but then we
No,
actually look back at it years later. I'm like, we are friends and we have
yeah.
helped each other at some point. So
I
yeah.
was gonna say, we did a fellowship. We did a fellowship event not that long ago. I didn't see you there. I was doing
No, I
interviews.
didn't go. I can't remember what happened, but I didn't go.
Gotcha. Well, we're gonna try to do more stuff like that. It was so
Yeah.
much fun. Like we're gonna try to
Yeah.
start doing more stuff like that. So here's a question. I wanted to ask you this earlier, but I always love to. This is, I guess, this kind of ties into. I always like to talk about motivation, like writer's block, procrastination. This
Mhm.
is something that comes up all the time in our community, especially when you're just starting out. But I like to start with, what do you think it is that actually like drives you to want to write and to be serious about this and to be disciplined with it? Because I feel like that there's a huge difference that I see in people I talk with is there are people who are disciplined and passionate about it. They love it. And then there are people that kind of are still dabbling. So what do you think it is that even drives you in the first place to want to really do this?
That I love it. I really, really love it. I also think I am very disciplined. I do have that. But I remember, I think I can compare this, but I did ballet when I was little, younger. And I remember, ballet is hard. It's really hard, especially like if you don't have the body for it, the measurements just don't, they don't work with you. You can still do things and everything, but it may be harder for some people. So I just remember, like when I would try to do something that I wasn't succeeding at, and then finally doing it was like, yes, like this sense of accomplishment. So I feel like that is also kind of what I like about writing, starting with a really, really shitty scene that is your first draft, and then just getting to the moment where you feel it here, that is like something that I use as a measurement now is that I cry. I mean, I'm very sensitive, but if I don't cry with my work, it means that it's not there yet. I have to make myself cry. And I enjoy it. I mean, of course, there's days that is very frustrating, but I really, really, really enjoy writing. I really love it. And yes.
What is your process? Like, what is your actual like daily routine, your discipline? What is that process like?
So I used to be good at writing at night. I'm not able to anymore because I'm just like the day already drained me. So I now write in the mornings, but I actually found out that I'm also kind of sleepy when I'm waking up. So what I do is just I wake up, have my breakfast, go to the gym, work out, shower, and then I'm fresh. And then I try to write just for like 2 to 4 hours. I don't write more. I used to write like the 8-hour days, and now I realize that I'm like, nope, I am way more effective when I write less hours. So what I do is I just schedule my time of like 10 to 2 or whatever. And I use a Pomodoro technique. Like I have a watch in my computer that, it gives you 25 minutes to work and then 5 minutes as a break. And that helps me a lot with procrastinating, because before it's kind of like, well, I'm going to be writing until 5 p.m. So I'm going to Google this. I'm going to watch an episode of this. I'm going to do this. But if I am like, it's just 25 minutes, then go. And then you have your break. Sometimes I even take like longer breaks, right? But then I'm so focused, and that really, really helps me get my deadlines done.
What was the name of that technique? What was that called? 25/5?
Pomodoro.
Cool. I got to look out that kind of stuff. This is the kind of stuff, like these little things like this, that really are helpful for people that are struggling with it. What about writer's block? What are your thoughts on, I have so many mixed, everyone says something different about this, but it's like there's two philosophies of writer's block that I've kind of noticed, which is it's bullshit or it's real. Like there is no real writer's block. It's just emotion. But then there's the other people that are like, no, like it is creative. But what are your thoughts on writer's block? Or how do you have any tips to like get past that, that block?
I believe more in tiredness than block. I've noticed that when I'm blocked, I'm just tired. So what I try to do is like, okay, it really is not flowing today. I'm just going to take the day off and reset my brain. Because it is true that sometimes we go and go and go and go, especially when you're on TV, on network TV that works really, really fast. I feel like there's even times that, I mean, I don't have the luxury to just take a day off, but I even feel like sometimes my kind of like my soul leaves my body and someone else is writing. I don't know how the hell I get the writing done. But I think it is just that I'm tired. So instead of being like, go do it, Lucy, and it's better to get one page done, I'm like, I'm just going to take the day off and I'll write more fresh tomorrow, and it works for me. Like, wow. I think I'm just, I don't know. I do think that writers tend to be very harsh on ourselves. I want to put myself there, but not anymore, because I think I found like a more healthy relationship with work after experiencing burnout. I'm like, I do not want this to ever happen again. So yeah, I'm not like a person that is like working all the time anymore. I'm more strategic about it, and I'm kind to myself.
Yeah, I want to make an observation that I notice. It seems like you are this very self-aware. Like like you said a bunch of things in this interview. You're like, well, I noticed that I don't write well at night. I'm tired in the morning. I don't write well, so I change my process. I do feel like self-awareness is really important with figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. And there's a lot of writers, a lot of my friends that I love. If you listen to this, I love y'all, but very hard on themselves and really not paying attention to what they're feeling and like what they're thinking. I feel like it's really important to kind of know what's happening internal,
And I was there too, whenever I was blocked or tired. I do think it's just tiredness. I just like, I would feel terrible. I'll be like, oh, I didn't write today. But now it's like, okay, well, take the day off. And I do, and then I'm super fresh the next day. Now, there's a difference between actually being tired and then being kind of like, I don't know how to start. And when that happens, the Pomodoro helps me a lot. It's like, just 25 minutes, Lucy, just do it. And it just unlocks. It's kind of like turning a switch on and off.
That's awesome.
But when it's tiredness, I do rest.
So there's it's already been 45 minutes. That's crazy. I feel like we've been only talking for like 20 minutes, but there's a few things I want to ask you about. One, what is the for you worked on TV shows, like you have all these different things you worked on. What is the climate right now, like in Hollywood, in the industry with work? Do you work from home mostly? Do you still go into writers' rooms? Like, and then what are your general thoughts on like the tension in the industry right now with like theaters and streaming? I'm just curious, like you can kind of go wherever you want with that, but I'm curious to get your thoughts.
My last season of All Rise was a hybrid. So we did go in person for the beginning of like a couple weeks, 2-3 weeks, just to get to know each other and actually be with each other. And then we moved to Zoom because there's a lot of writers actually that don't live in LA anymore. They left. So then we moved to Zoom, but then we actually cover set in person. So it was lovely. I did like the hybrid aspect of it. Like I would get out of the house and be on set for like a full week and a half, and then go back and write in my pajamas if I wanted to. So it was lovely. I don't know about other shows. I've heard like similar things. Some are on Zoom, some are already in person, some are still hybrid. So I think people are kind of figuring it out. But I think the studios save money, if we're at home. So
I always love, I'm so curious about it. Like you said, we talked about it a little bit. Like, I do feel like the industry is changing where there probably is more opportunity for people who don't live in LA because of Zoom, but how do you get those opportunities? It's still very like, there is no process. Like it's still very hard to kind of break not
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
But I hear the same thing, that there is a lot of Zoom writers' rooms and stuff now, which is cool. I don't know. What do you like more? Do you like going in? Do you like writing from home more?
I like the hybrid. I would love to go into the office like a couple days a week and then the rest at home. Mostly because, and this goes again with self-care, but when I'm at home, I'm able to cook for myself. I'm able to go to the gym. I'm able to, yeah, go to bed early or wake up a little later. Just like having that flexibility is great. But I also feel like if I'm the 5 days stuck in here, I'm like, I need to see people. I need to get out of the house. So I think mixing it up is just the perfect combination for me. And even now, I mean, I'm not in a room right now, so I try to get out of the house at least 1 or 2 days a week to write at a coffee shop or.
That's awesome. That's a healthy way to approach it. I'm curious about your script. So can you tell me a little bit more, like give me the little blurb of Sophie and Valentina, just because that's not a horror screenplay, right? But now it seems like you're doing more horror. So I'm kind of curious, like, what was the transition into horror? And then I would love to get your thoughts on horror films and what that's like right
Yeah,
now.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
like horror is huge. I feel like it's blowing up so much right now, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But what was that like transition like for you?
I I mean, Sophie and Valentina, even if it's not horror, I think it's still about fear. Like it's two characters that are very, very afraid of something. We have Sophie, that is a ballet teacher that is going blind, that has a disease that it just has no cure. So she has the fear of losing her sight. And then we have a transgender woman, Mexican, that is terrified about going home and seeing her family again. So it's a road trip, initially well, Sophie hires Valentina to take her to Mexico to a curandera to see if her eyes can get fixed. And they develop a relationship, and they together, and because of what they give to each other, they end up facing those fears. So even if it's not horror, I think my element of the themes that I explore is still there. Like it was truly an exploration of fear and what happens when love comes in the way. Oh, that
Well, it
sounded
sounds like
sweet. Yeah. And
love
I'm
it.
very, very proud of it. I mean, funny enough, that script actually got me my current job, that I'm rewriting a horror feature for Paramount. And the thing that they wanted to fix in this rewrite was the relationships. And my manager was like, I'm sending them this script, and it actually got me a job in horror. So you never know. But the transition is that I actually had horror scripts on or thrillers on TV. So there were the ones that were being sent out for me to get staffed. And my first show was Two Sentences for a Story. So it wasn't kind of hard. And then my second show was All Rise. It was the middle of the pandemic, and it was not a horror. So I was like, oh, it was a lot of talks with my reps of like, should we do it? Should we not? Because, we want to build this brand. But at the same time, the industry right now is dead. It was beginning of the pandemic. We're lucky to have a job. I had to renew my visa. So I'm like, I'm taking it. And I watched the show and I loved it. It's super sweet, but I was also terrified because I'm like, it's a little quirky. I don't think I'm good with comedy, because I think comedy translates to culture. I don't know if I'm funny in English. So I did it, and it was wonderful. And I also think that I input like a little bit of my horror aspect in how I told those stories in the court. So yeah, it was.
So what are your thoughts? Sorry, what are your thoughts on just because we have 10 more minutes, but
Yeah.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on horror right now in the industry? How, like Jordan Peele, like what do you think of Jordan Peele? Hereditary, obviously, like one of the best kind of horror movies that I feel like I think it kind of exploded horror in a different way, because it really kind of got back to like horror, like it kind of got back to like the Rosemary Baby vibe of like allegorical storytelling in horror and like really exploring metaphors and stuff. But what are your thoughts on like where it's going right now in the industry?
Love horror, and I think it couldn't be better right now. I think it's in a great place because you do have the elevated horror, right? That I don't like saying elevated horror because I think it's kind of mean to the other horror, but that's the word they're
I know
using,
what you
I'll
mean.
use it. But you know, you have Hereditary and what Jordan Peele is doing, but then you also have something like the Black Phone that I absolutely love, or Smile, or Barbarian. And I'm just like, it's just wonderful. I actually think the Black Phone and Smile are my favorite horror movies of this year.
I still need to see
Which,
Black Tom. Didn't see it. I need to see
oh,
it.
you
Small.
should. It's so
So good.
good. It was. I watched it and I'm like, this is the type of horror that that I am drawn to. It has a layer of sweetness that I just absolutely loved, and then Smile, talking a little bit about, you know, mental illness, but without really mental health. And it's not, you know, it's not as profound as probably others, but I found it enough, you know, that I was like, but it's perfect. I loved it.
No,
Um,
I fully agree. I also feel like Smile was just geniusly marketed because
it's
it
good.
reached, yeah, it reached such a broad audience. And like you said, it doesn't like hit you in the face with mental illness
Yeah,
theme, but it's there. So it like opens
yeah.
up the conversation still just in such a awesome way, you know, and the
It's,
freaking girl smiling at the baseball game or whatever, like that marketing, it really made me
yeah,
think of things like,
yeah,
why aren't more
yeah.
people doing this? You know, like that's so,
No, I
um,
loved it. I thought it was very effective too, the way the scares were played out. It was just like wonderful. The one where we're all leaning in to listen to what she's listening on the audio, and it's like, that's not what we're here for, and it just gets you.
yeah.
Oh, I was very pleased. I really, really loved that movie.
So
Yeah.
what are some stuff that you're working on right now? Do you have any like passion projects or features, spec features? Like what are some things you're working on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still employed. I'm doing a rewrite, but for myself, I am writing a horror film finally, because I mean, honestly, being on TV, it's just very draining. I just didn't have the time, and finally, I had a chat with my reps, and they approved my idea. Yeah, it's sort of like a Misery meets, I don't know, Don't Breathe, probably.
Oh,
And
cool.
yeah, it's just, I don't know how to actually logline it yet, because I am still working on it, but it's going to be a grieving mother, you
Nice.
know, that her son's organs are donated when he dies. So all she wants is to be able to bury her son.
Wow.
So what she needs is to get those organs back, to put them back in, to be able to bury him.
I mean, that's a pretty good log line premise right there.
Well, it's
That's
not a logline per se, but yes, that's kind of like the essence of the film. Yeah.
I have like a last couple of things. One
Yeah.
is do you have or what advice or motivation or wisdom would you give to someone in our community who maybe they're just starting out, or maybe they just aren't finding success. They're not getting that break. They're not winning in competitions, but they love this craft. Like what advice or words of wisdom would you give someone that's kind of struggling right now to get things going?
Um, I would say write for yourself. Because yeah, I actually have a few friends that I think they're incredibly talented, and they're very like struggling to find that way in. And I'm like, but why? They're so amazing. And I think easier said than done, because again, when we're waiting for that, yes, we are waiting for the validation and someone to see us, but I feel like it turns into actually trying to write for them. It's like, what are they gonna like? Who should I reach out to? How should I pitch myself? And it's kind of like tailored for them. So I think if we continue to just write for ourselves and take care of ourselves, and just live, you know, something that I've kind of been learning. I think I'm actually a better writer now that I'm not stuck in the house, now that I'm more social, just living my life, going to concerts, just focusing on my relationships, all of those things that I live, all those moments. I'm actually like, oh, I have a little moment of a scene right now. So you just continue to actually do that, and you keep collecting material, but taking care of yourself too, because we all think that our max are our best tool, but we are our best tool. Like if we're tired and drained and stressed and everything, it's not gonna be at its best. So just, yeah, take time for yourself, I guess.
No, I love that. I'm so happy to hear like our generation, kind of like our generation and younger. I really do feel like there's a new movement happening in Hollywood, getting rid of like trying to get rid of the toxic culture that's been present in Hollywood for so long, like
Yeah.
toxic competitiveness, like beating yourself up. Let's work 16, 20 hours a day.
Yeah.
Which, I get it. Like there are some moments where like we all got to come together, I'm sure. But I love that you're talking about this stuff. I think it's really important to talk about like mental health and taking care
Yeah.
of your, like you said, that you feel like you're a better writer. And there's a correlation there, when you start taking care of yourself and stuff.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, this was a really awesome conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to chat.
Yes. I loved
And
it. Thank you so much for inviting me.